Well, hello and welcome to our very first Business Voice podcast hosted by the Truro and Colchester Chamber of Commerce. And I'm the Executive Director, Sherry Martell, and I'm here with our President, Ron Smith, and our Vice President, Matthew Mossman today.
Thanks for having us, Sherry.
Yes, thank you.
So what we will begin with, we want to talk about 2020 and how it changed the way we do business and some issues that were going on in our community. So we can't think of 2020 without thinking about the pandemic and COVID-19 and how it changed everything about that year. Certainly in March when we found out that it was a global pandemic and put things in place after that and how we worked our way through that year. You know, Ron, what were some of the ways business were affected?
Well, as you said, I mean, everything has been affected in 2020. And from a business point of view, we've seen businesses that have failed and not been able to move ahead. And we've seen certain sectors and certain businesses have extraordinary years that they've never had before. And it's all because of the pandemic and the things that it did change, from supplies to different types of supplies, additional savings with restricted travel. And the list goes on. I mean, the regulations and the things that staff had to do in order to go to work every day, the recognition of some of our lowest paid people being considered the most essential, and the way that people look at folks in traditional service jobs or retail jobs. So everything has changed.
So Matthew, what are some of your thoughts on the way that you saw our community affected over the past year?
Well, it's certainly made everybody very vulnerable as well. All of a sudden, people who probably felt they were in control of their own personal business situations just didn't know what to do anymore. And I think that that's too where a bit of a value of the chamber has been able to come in, because you know, we've been able to be there to help, you know, maybe not answer questions, but at least direct people to the right places to help them, because there's been so many rules and changes and regulations that it's like a roadmap that's hard to navigate. So, you know, I agree with everything Ron said, and it changes every day with COVID-19. Hearts go out to small, medium-sized, big businesses with this, and we just have to hope that as we go through 2021 that things get better for all of us.
So I know certainly from the staff perspective with the chamber, we mobilized very quickly in adapting our website to have instantaneous information as soon as it was flowing from government on programs or education workshops and funding, grants that were available. Certainly from your perspective and what you're hearing from the business community, were they easy to apply for? How did they help?
Look, personally, I've got to say that I thought they rolled out quickly, found it easy to work through, found that most people I've spoken to found it an easy process to apply, and that the money arrived very quickly. Yes, there were some instances where it didn't satisfy everyone's needs, and I think some adjustments were made. I can't speak to that too clearly. And, you know, it was there when it was needed for a lot of people. And I don't think it could be everything to everyone, but it changed so much across the landscape that, you know, how could you possibly solve all the problems? I mean, we were very fortunate in Nova Scotia. We did not get hit near as hard, and we got over the initial trauma and being terrified. We had a pretty good summer of reasonable freedoms. But if you're relying on services or suppliers from outside this province or outside this country, you could still have your business shut down or severely affected with lack of supplies. But
yeah, it all depends on who you are and what you're doing as a business. And I guess in fairness, you know, when you look at it, that phrase that's been said so many times, they're building the plane as they're flying it. So, you know, I guess it's maybe still too early to say whether some of the rollouts were right or wrong. Couple years, I guess we'll be able to look back on that and give it a full grade. But I think the best thing from the chamber standpoint is that we can support and have conversations with businesses as much as we can and guide them in the right direction as much as we can.
So I'm looking at Matthew and I'm thinking, of all the people that I know, he's one of the ones that have been greatly affected by having corporate offices closed during this time and the challenges that face where employees have been working from home. Matthew, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the things that you felt personally affected by?
Well, and I know, talking with a number of managers throughout the community, that we probably feel like we've also earned a psychology degree this year, because you're not just managing the business, you're managing people, and everybody has had to learn a new way of working and communicating. Myself included, my staff, none of us had ever worked from home before. And of course, like a lot of us, a year ago this time, no one knew what Zoom was. So it's something that we all had to do as human beings to adapt to not being out and want to see or could see people, or in some cases. But like Ron said, gosh, we're so lucky for where we are, that we have had probably a little bit less restrictions at times throughout the past year than other communities, and it has allowed us to still be safe, but still see one another and still interact business to business. So we haven't been in a situation where we've been shut down for a long period of time, which has certainly helped. But when you're in a situation where you're not able to work out of the building or the central place that you're used to, it takes some adjusting, and having to work from home is an adjustment for sure, but everyone's getting better at it as more time goes. So
when you touched on mental health and the issues that have arisen during COVID-19 have certainly put a lot of stress and pressure on people's mental health. We heard during a webinar the other day with the Chamber Group Insurance Plan offered through Teladoc and the Arete services that the numbers for people impacted with mental health issues has increased from 1 in 5 to possibly 50% of our population, and they indicated this may just be the tip of the iceberg. So as business owners looking after themselves, looking after their employees, why is that important for us to keep mental health front of mind?
Well, contrary to Matthew, we were considered an essential service, and our employees went to work basically every day. And it ranged from people that were, really almost terrified every day to the point that they felt they could not come to work, to those that took it rather, day to day with the proper precautions, and almost non-existent were those that really felt complete freedom. So that's your employees, and they have to deal and meet your customers one-on-one. You've got customers that are angry, customers that are frustrated, customers that have been locked in too long, and other customers that are just enjoyed. It's the full gamut. So, and it's the same with the ownership, people that are out there. Some are making payroll and paying their bills, and others not sure what's going to happen next week. So there is a full spectrum of how badly some people have fared during this, and everything from isolation and loneliness to trying to overcome and worrying about their employees or worrying about their neighbor. And so I don't think anyone's come out unscathed. I would think 50% is low.
What are your thoughts on this, Matthew, and how people can, really focus on their mental health right now?
Well, I think it's especially important that, and we hear it with business, be kind to our small local businesses, but be kind to everybody right now. It's just, mental health is a policy of the Chamber, so it's certainly been an important advocacy piece for the Chamber for a number of years. But I think 2020 has really probably shifted it to a whole new level that we never knew existed. So I think that's as simple as it is at the beginning, is to make sure that we have patience and we're kind, and after that, what sort of support by talking with your employees can you offer? and are there either seminars or webinars or things? I know we can get too many webinars and things like that, but some of them that I know some of our employees have taken part in, the feedback has been very positive, and they felt that it's been good to be able to be a part of that. So I think as long as there's support, and the opportunity to know that the employees can talk to their bosses, it's good.
No, and much as we've seen a campaign over a number of years to take the stigma out of the term mental health, whether it's a change of the narrative or the change of the description, I don't think anyone out there right now can admit that they haven't been affected. So if that's a simple definition of mental health, that you've been affected by something beyond your control, then make it comfortable for people to talk about. It's a couple of years ago, Sherry, when you took our Chamber's recommendation for a policy at the national level to support the mental health of business owners. Well, we didn't mean the old connotation all the business owners had an issue or a problem. We meant they need the support of those around them because they're carrying the weight of their shoulders in their business at all times. And that's all this means in this case, is that everyone out there, whether they've been isolated, alone, operating in a different environment, operating afraid, going to work, that they've been affected. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, no, we're very proud of the national policy that we put forward to the Canadian Chamber on addressing entrepreneurship and employee mental health. And certainly in this community, we have great resources through the Colchester East Hants Mental Health Association, and we look forward to working with several of our partners, our rec departments, fitness facilities, and others, the community health boards, in the new year, during this year, on ways that we can support business and wellness programs. So that's something that we'll talk further about at a future podcast. Certainly 2020 was a year where people needed to adapt quickly and changes were needed. Ron, maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the things that our chamber did to adapt to the ever-changing needs of business during 2020.
Well, and I mean, a self-gratifying pat on the back for you folks here at the Chamber, the staff, and for the way they adapted very quickly. It could have been very easy to pull back, isolate with everyone else, but instead the Chamber jumped out and really tried to be the point of main contact. And I admit openly that I didn't go looking for information. I clicked on the website and could look for all the information I needed, really, where to find a government program, for example. And we spoke to a lot of people that had never, ever touched Zoom or done Skype. There's still a few old people like me that really don't like technology that much. But for those that were used to being out every day and dealing with people, and they're sitting at home in their basements or their renovated closets for an office, to see a group of people participating and actually interacting, it's like the grandparent whose grandchildren live on the other side of the country. They actually get to see them. They actually get to interact, have a conversation. It went a long way. And I think people got a tremendous amount out of very pertinent topics for our times. And the other thing that was nice about it is that with the ever-changing situations with COVID, I won't say it was easy, but it was certainly doable to be exceptionally adaptive and tailor the webinars and the interactive Zoom conferences or events with people so that the subjects were meaningful. I think it went a long way. And there's all kinds of people running around with a chamber mask. You can call it shameless advertising if you want, but we're there to save lives.
Yeah, no, you guys did a lot of work with the reopening kits that you worked with the small businesses to be able to come in and get those proper kits. So as simple as what signage goes on the floor of my small business, and making sure that those regulations are followed properly. You talked about the masks, Ron. I think you had about 1,500, masks that you gave out. So I hope we see some around town, to be honest, and in the county. And so I think that how did the chamber adapt during COVID-19 and during 2020? I think we tried as much as anybody could in regards to adapting and listening to business, like we try to do, and listening to what their needs are. We're not dictating it. We want to listen and then adapt to what the business community is telling us they need. And I think we tried to achieve that in 2020.
So certainly one of the, I would say, new ways to communicate for some of us who had been, holdouts on entering the webinar and virtual meeting platform realm. Are you zoomed out? How do you feel about this new platform for
Well,
meeting?
since Ron says he's the old fella, I'll jump on this one. Are you zoomed out? I'll answer that and say yes. But I think that, it's maybe something you kind of have to be a little respectful for, depending on, who the business is. Like, that may be their way that they have to try to communicate right now. So it's trying to work with them. Obviously face-to-face is what we want to do. But, we are still in the middle of a pandemic. But I'll tell you, there's kind of maybe a little bit of a tie-in back to mental health a little bit. Because when you say, are you zoomed out, what does that mean? Does it mean that you're just tired of using the platform? Or are you tired because it takes so much energy out of you if you do 3 or 4 or 5 a day? And it's a different type of tired. And, like I mentioned before, the mental health, it's affecting us in a way that we didn't even know existed a year ago. I have certainly worked and tried myself to manage my Zoom calls and make sure there are breaks and some things you I guess you get forced into that you have to do them, but you really do need to try to manage the time and make sure that you're taking a bit of a break, because you can overdo it and you're going to have a different type of tired at the end of the day. You're constantly on if you're doing Zoom calls over and over and over again. So it takes a lot of energy out of you.
Yeah, and I think it will change the way we do business forever. In some cases, it'll be businesses that are used to getting together in large numbers that won't have the budget for several years to come, maybe part of a decade, that they'll employ more of the technology. Others will, of course, want to get out and meet in person again, and some of that will always happen. But I think it will make a change. And the technology was tested pretty severely. Our infrastructure for internet, drawing attention to who's rural, who's not rural, all those things were highlighted by the fact that we were forced into using a Zoom or similar technology for meeting. So there's going to be improvements. The technology is going to change. They're going to make it more comfortable. They're going to make it better for those people that find it absolutely essential. So if nothing else, it'll always be a part. It'll be a bigger part than it was in 2019, I think, forever. And no, that's not my preference, but it has proven to be a very useful tool.
Well, I find our membership is a very welcoming group of people, and I miss having events where we're hosting and bringing people together to meet each other in person. And certainly as public health regulations came into effect, we had to pull back on the number of in-person events we were hosting. One of our highlights in 2020 was our AGM, where we were able to bring people together in a magnificent way and host Perrin Beatty, CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. And second to that, I would describe as nearly magical, after not being able to be around people for so long, to have our Women in Business breakfast where we had 40 business women join us in October. It was really, really nice. And we're looking forward to a time when public health restrictions can be lifted, where we can start bringing people back together in small groups and adapting again to the changes that are in front of us. But in the meantime, we will continue to offer those quality webinars and social interactions through whatever means that we can in a safe way. Certainly, there have been changes to the fabric of the business community over the past year. So let's start with you, Matthew. How about you tell us a little bit about your observations of the Truro and Colchester community right now?
I think it can change depending on what government regulations come forward. But, I would say that even through the challenging times of 2020, where there were some months tougher than others, I'd say that things still seem to stay very positive, and that there was a light at the end of the tunnel. And I know that sounds sort of broad, but it is really something that, I think people really have had to adapt very quickly, deal with situations that they've never thought they'd probably ever have to deal with before. But we're still here, and we're still going. The town, the county, the areas. We still have small local businesses, and there's still those little pockets in Colchester County that we know that this business is here and that business is, and we're still going. So, when I look at the business community from 2020, I think that it's been. Even though the greatest obstacles in the world presented themselves, there's still positivity and optimism for a bright future in our area. I do truly believe that.
Yeah, no, and I think it was, again, when you look at the full picture, some of the oldest businesses we have in this area were some of the most adaptive and did different things. Others... Again, as you said, it's a positive outlook, and we were fortunate enough that this area had enough diversity that our businesses were in relatively good shape coming into 2020, and most of them, or many of them, have been able to put together contingency plans or hold together, adopt to some more online commerce, which is one of the programs that you've been running this year, just getting people started with a better online presence, and home delivery through one of our partners, the TC PEP, Downtown Trail Partnership, working closely. All those things combined to try and recognize that it's through support and that no one's in this one alone. So even during complete shutdown, I think most of our small businesses were able to reopen, because we had relatively maybe 90 days of kind of complete shutdown and then gradual reopening. So we've been very fortunate. But I think a lot of people have recognized that they can't just do business as usual, that they're not alone, that you have to look closer to home and cut your supply lines where you can, shorten them up, and you can get your raw materials, make your products without having to wait on deliveries from overseas or miles and miles away. And I think a lot of small businesses, I think a lot of local people recognize that many of their small businesses were good to do business with. That it wasn't scary to go into a small shop and think that they couldn't compete with the large box stores. And they appreciated walking into a store where there were 5 people instead of 500. And other than that, they might not have left their homes. So.
Yeah, and I also think, too, that if I can just throw this in, that, they saw some of the local businesses come together and support one another and cross-promote one another that way. So that's just a great sign of a great business community that we're in. And, I think the Colchester area has still been, going before 2020, been a very vibrant business area of shops or what have you. And like Ron said, this hit us, and they were able to figure out how to adapt. But that they're going to come out stronger in the end because of that. So
certainly there are some sectors that were hit harder than others. As you mentioned earlier, some thrived and some had some very
accommodations,
strong...
restaurants, tourism industry in general. They had a very, very rough year.
So certainly when, through the holidays, we share a lot of messages about shopping local, eat local, support local. But it's not just through the holidays that people need to realize these businesses are operating year round, and everyone needs to have that mindset that the support needs to continue long through this. The pandemic is not over. It's the end isn't in sight. However, we are very, very hopeful that with vaccines, the numbers will be kept lower, with public health protocols in place, that we are able to have some of the return of economic driven success that we've had in the past. So certainly the feeling of optimism is there. We've surveyed our members and we did ask about the level of optimism, and even we were surprised reading some of the positive comments that people were feeling despite the challenges that they were facing. So overall, I think that speaks well of our business community. So what are some of the things that we can look forward to for the Chamber in 2021?
I think there's going to be some things to definitely look forward to. But to your point, I think there's anyone relying on interprovincial, out of province, out of country travel, tourism in general, I think they're still going to be off to a pretty slow start this year. Listening to the news today, Nova Scotia is not quite up to par with their percentage of vaccination as some provinces, but we have them and they're getting rolled out. And so with Nova Scotia right now in the Atlantic provinces standing out as still being one of the safest places to live and do business almost anywhere, we're still looking more at internal travel and internal tourism. Again, I think probably for a good part of the early summer anyway. And yes, I think that's where businesses have to concentrate. Recognize that there's wonderful things to see, wonderful things to do in the relative safety of your own backyard, and go do them. And that we should continue as a chamber to get that message out there. The Shop Local website that we had this year illuminated a lot of our merchants that some may not have been aware of the services they offered, but it's a great time to find out who would like to put their name on there for this coming summer and what they offer to give people a chance to leave their own homes, whether it's a long weekend or a week or two, and see something else in this province and know what's available out there.
Yeah, I think focusing on local is going to be the key. And like you just said, Ron, I mean, specifically with the Shop Local, that's something that the Chamber, we can build on that. We had it, to a certain degree in 2020. Let's double it in 2021 and have even more businesses want to be a part of that. And the Chamber staff can definitely work on how that can any business can be a part of that through with the Chamber. So, I guess looking at 2021, you got to feel a little optimistic in the sense that, there is starting to be some vaccination rollouts, and government officials say there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So let's continue to believe that, I suppose. But also for the Chamber, just making sure that, if there are any opportunities that we have to do any pieces of advocacy, that we need to just make sure we're speaking on behalf of the business back to government through this. We will do that. We will be there, and we will make sure that we're the voice of the business back to government throughout this. Of course, understanding, like I said earlier, that the government is, not flying at the seat of their pants, but they're certainly, this is all new to them as well, trying to roll things out. But we'll definitely keep an eye on them for businesses.
Being a resident of this area for more than a couple of decades, you're starting to see all kinds of new business ideas. Even before COVID, I mean, we've closed streets, we've held street parties, we've got worldwide recognition for some of our geological tourism sites. There's things out there that need to be more recognized. And I think we have the business people that have the innovation and the willingness to do things different and in spite of tradition. And we've seen a lot of changes in this area with new things coming up, and from skate parks to walking outside. And there's a lot of people that are realizing outside exists. I heard on the news today that it's impossible to rent a pair of snowshoes anywhere because so many people are exploring their own backyard. So those are the adaptive things I think that we can be part of, is bringing those partners together, making sure that we're helping get the information out as to where you can go and drive people outside to appreciate what we have. As we get through the summer, I think you'll see things start to improve dramatically.
Wonderful. Well, I thank you both, Matthew Mossman, our Vice President, and Ron Smith, the President of the Chamber, for joining us this afternoon to have a conversation about some of the initiatives of the Chamber and our viewpoints from 2020. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I look forward to greeting everyone again soon for our next podcast.